Hey guys, welcome to Battles Gaming and to what is another slightly different video on this channel. For today I'm going to be briefly discussing my thoughts on the upcoming Ubisoft game Far Cry 6 as we now finally have some very exciting news. That is, for those of you that don't yet know, Ubisoft premiering a live video on all their socials of a Far Cry 6 gameplay reveal, something I know we're all very excited by, whether you're a Far Cry fan such as myself or just a gamer in general. The Far Cry franchise would have to be one of the more well-known game series, and this is because each of the games are always so well considered, especially from a storytelling point of view, with many of their single-player campaigns forming many truly revolutionary gameplay experiences for players in the form of many memorable moments in the franchise that have often made players think more deeply about the open world they are playing in, but even in the real world as well. Also, burning down weed farms whilst listening to dubstep is pretty cool too. It's these narrative experiences, both positive and negative, that have created many deep seated, meaningful discussions, questions, and ethical dilemmas for players since the inception of the first Far Cry game by Crytek in 2004. Now, first of all, I am really excited by this gameplay reveal, as I'm sure all of you watching this video are too. There certainly has been lots of uncertainty about the game, as since the release of the cinematic trailers in July 2020, there's really been no news about the game apart from a few bittersweet announcements about the game being delayed. Now, I say bittersweet because whilst it definitely would have been pleasurable to have the game out already, I'm really glad Ubisoft seemed to be taking a much more considered approach to this game's development, and hopefully this extra time they've had will mean the game is more fleshed out than if they were to have released it much earlier as originally planned. Now, without knowing anything that is going to be in the gameplay reveal, I'm now going to discuss what excites me and what I'm wary about with Far Cry 6, using what we already know and doing some slight speculation too. The first point I'd like to address is how the repetitive nature or formula of Far Cry 6 is still basically here. Whilst they've definitely evolved in that the protagonist is a native of the location and not an outsider, Ubisoft have otherwise copied what they've done in previous games, although I don't necessarily believe this to be a bad thing. I think Ubisoft have really hit the nail on the head in terms of picking Cuba as the main inspiration for this game, and I think everyone, myself included, will be really interested to see how Ubisoft direct this game in terms of storytelling and narrative. Cuba has always been a place one would associate with lots of conflict and tension, but also a place that is a beautiful tropical paradise. Simply put, it really defines Ubisoft's formula for picking locations in its franchise, in other words, where a Far Cry game should be set. Variable number 1 is a place stricken with past or present conflict, and variable number 2 is a beautiful, mesmerizing environment, a formula that is the same as past Far Cry games and now Far Cry 6 with the fictional Cuban-inspired Yara. Additionally, the narrative that Ubisoft have decided for this game is like every Far Cry game before it. Some sort of oppressive government, regime, or system that is negatively impacting on the player's journey, and the player's rebellion and retaliation towards that particular antagonistic force. I feel this is because any form of media, TV show, film, book, game, whatever it is, that focuses on this idea of an oppressive government regime or system creates this really intriguing background where, regardless of who you are, you want to see how this will eventually play out. This is pretty much the same basic formula Ubisoft have been using for all their other Far Cry games, but it works and it keeps people on their toes no matter how repetitive it may seem. Moving on from these repetitive frameworks though, and regardless of whether you appreciate them or not, I'm sure everyone can agree how excited they are in seeing more of this Cuban-inspired playground we're going to be able to play in. We've already seen glimpses of the open world through different trailers and screenshots, but what I really love about this game already is the variety of different environments we as the player will get to explore. Not only will we get to experience the tropical and natural elements of a Cuban-inspired location, but for the first time in a Far Cry game, we will also get to experience a concrete jungle, i.e. a city environment. Obviously, you'd expect the capital city of Yara, Esperanza, to take center stage of the origin of all pain suffered throughout the Yara open world, as this will likely be the epicenter of all the politics, bad blood, conflict, bloody uprisings, and power struggles the people of the world in Yara will be subjected to, and therefore the place where I'd expect the game to position the most important gameplay and narrative events throughout the story. What this means is the introduction of heavy urban combat into a Far Cry game, the first of its kind in this franchise, but not really something Ubisoft don't have experience in, with many of their other games already featuring heavy urban environments. This means that despite this being the first Far Cry game with this heavy urban density, I'd imagine the bar of expectation would still be set pretty high from players, myself included, in terms of what Ubisoft can deliver in this part of the open world. What I'm really hoping for is that most of the buildings aren't just there to fill the map, but each building feels lived in and is fully accessible to the player, although some buildings might be locked and you may need to find a key or complete a certain mission to be able to enter them. But then once you're able to get inside those buildings, you can explore them and find out secrets and stories within the game about the bloody struggle for power in Yara. Novelty things such as collectibles in the form of books, travel and citizenship documents, cooking recipes, songs in the form of records, CDs, or song sheets. Perhaps you can play them in your vehicle. Or something like that. I don't really know. There's lots of different possibilities. Photos, newspaper clippings, audio logs, etc. Or just about the people, wildlife, weather, nature, vehicles, technology, weapons, and culture of Yara through perhaps personal diaries, logs, books, electronic devices, intel, and crafting plans scattered throughout people's houses, offices, restaurants, pubs, businesses, or any other key historical buildings inside Esperanza. There could also even be spontaneous side missions on notice boards around Esperanza for players to complete that would unlock rewards or perhaps even further missions that add to the idea of a lived-in environment and well fleshed out story and world. What this also means, though, is people, specifically citizens, Libertad fighters, or government loyalists scattered throughout the city, to also make it feel lived in, and a place at the center of a huge conflict and movement between two opposing forces, and the victims caught in between. It will indeed be interesting to see how convincing the city and urban environment is in satisfying this notion, especially considering how ambitious that all sounds. What I also hope this brings is full-scale verticality and close-quarter combat to the map in these urban areas, where players will have to often adapt to different combat situations and use tactics to outsmart enemy forces. For example, using the bell tower of a cathedral as a reconnaissance or sniping position, whilst your AI teammates or co-op partners set up an ambush down at street level in an alley or road. Just thinking about all these different possibilities truly makes my body tingle. And finally, the third thing that really excites me about the upcoming Far Cry 6 and the gameplay reveal is this concept of a place that is frozen in time that has already been previously alluded to by the developers. I think the concept of a place that is frozen in time will be really cool, and this will really embrace the idea of an anti-government liberation movement and guerrilla force in Libertad, where I'd imagine they'd have to be really tactful to overcome the oppressive totalitarian government, which I'd imagine would have access to better weapons and technology than the rebel forces, as seen in the cinematic trailers back in July of 2020, where you can see a tank that has been destroyed by the Libertad movement, or alternatively the bloody sort of protest in the streets. You can see the government forces, they have riot shields, they're suited up in heavy police gear, I suppose you could say, whereas you compare that to the protesters, and they're not as well equipped, but they've still got their classic Molotov cocktails and that sort of thing. What I also speculate from this, though, is that perhaps the player or Danny Rojas, the game's main protagonist, will have to make extremely well thought out and intelligent decisions throughout the game to ensure the Libertad movement is a success, and just like the previous Far Cry games, having to pick between increasingly difficult and ethical choices that absolutely do your head in regardless of which option you choose. Now, moving on to what makes me worry about Far Cry 6 and the upcoming gameplay reveal is that, as you'd expect with this type of content, it is at the end of the day just an effective marketing tool used by Ubisoft to increase hype and subsequently potentially increase their sales. Whilst I feel like Ubisoft always do a really great job at these reveals in terms of showing us gamers a nice snippet of the open world environment, alongside a mission and some commentary by the lead creative and narrative director, who express their motivations, desires, and concerns for why things are the way they are, I often feel these gameplay reveals also open themselves up to potentially promising features that don't make it into the final product, or alternatively falsely portraying things in the gameplay that once again don't actually make it into the final product. The simplest anecdote for this is the Far Cry 4 World Gameplay premiere released on June 10th, 2014. Whilst I thoroughly enjoyed that video, that whole part of the map was extremely downgraded in the final version, including the absence of unscripted landslides, adventure zones, and even the false portrayal that the player would actually get to explore the Himalayan mountains, not it exclusively being reserved for just a few campaign missions and a purchasable DLC later down the track. Therefore, whilst I still watch these videos like a kid opening his Christmas presents on a Christmas morning, I also watch them with a slight grain of salt now, so I'm not too disappointed if they do end up failing to meet expectations. Before I wrap up this video, I just briefly wanted to give Ubisoft an idea. I know that this is never going to be seen by them, and it is of course inside 2 hours before they release the gameplay reveal, but I thought it would be incredibly cool if they not only featured the campaign, but also gave us a glimpse of the map editor side of things as well. The map editor isn't really something Ubisoft markets too well in the lead up to the release of its main Far Cry titles, such as Far Cry 4 and 5, and probably now a 6 as well, unfortunately, because it does make up half of what the game is, and it is such a huge feature that has so much potential. I'm actually going to make a video about this in the coming weeks, about why Ubisoft should market the map editor. Uh, you know, if they are going to bring it back in Far Cry 6, which I really do hope they do because it's definitely my favorite feature of the Far Cry franchise. But I thought it would be truly revolutionary and innovative if in this gameplay reveal they not only talk about the campaign, but they also give us a glimpse of the map editor returning, and it being just like Far Cry 5 but even better. But yeah, I just wanted to briefly put that in there. I was originally going to talk about this topic a little bit more in detail, but I didn't because I don't have enough time in this video, because otherwise I will release it after the gameplay reveal, thus making the whole point of this video pointless. For context, it is currently 10:55 p.m. as I am finishing up making this video, and the gameplay reveal releases at 12:30 a.m. my time. So it is inside 2 hours, but I will get there. But yeah, regardless, I will definitely be making a video on this particular topic. Ubisoft needing to market the map editor for the next Far Cry game, which is of course Far Cry 6, in the next few weeks. But otherwise, that pretty much wraps up my pre-reveal gameplay thoughts on Far Cry 6 and the gameplay reveal itself, which will of course be going live on Ubisoft socials inside 2 hours. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I really hope to grow this channel into a more inclusive mainstream Far Cry YouTube channel in the near future, so if you enjoyed this video and the points that I discussed, please be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for future channel notifications. Also, if you have any feedback on the video or would simply just like to leave your own comments about Far Cry 6, please feel free to use the comment section down below at your own leisure. I have been pretty inactive on YouTube until now, but despite working near full-time hours with a wacky work schedule, I'm confident that I will be able to start making a consistent flow of videos on this channel once again, as I've made some changes to my lifestyle that will hopefully give me extra energy and sleep that is needed for these videos and life in general. I always find it's not ever a lack of motivation that stops me from uploading more frequently, but rather just a busy and spontaneous schedule that is often changing and quite tiring. However, I love making these videos and the potential interactions I have with other Far Cry fans in the comment sections, so I'm definitely going to commit to this goal of uploading more consistently for the future. I've got a bunch of new community creations episodes releasing soon, some more of my own custom maps from Far Cry 5 in the pipeline, and of course we'll definitely be covering anything Far Cry 6 related in the form of either a speculative, suggestive, or informative nature of video, which I will organize into a new playlist on this channel called Far Cry 6 Discussion Videos. This is my plan for the future of this channel, and I feel it will be the best way to grow our small community here on Braddles Gaming YouTube into a more mainstream and inclusive Far Cry YouTube community in the near future. As always though, I'm Braddles Gaming, I'm signing out now, and remember to have yourselves a great day.